start recording. Okay, welcome to today's Guiding Schools Towards World-Class Education short hint chat. Today we have Meena Kumari Wood, who is a former principal in HMI and now an international educational consultant, specialising in transforming the curriculum so that it's more relevant to the learners. On that theme, Meena, alongside Nick Haddon, have published an excellent book entitled Secondary Curriculum Transformed, Enabling All to Achieve. That includes lots of case study examples as to how this can be achieved in your school. Meena, we're delighted to have you with us today, giving us the chance to learn more about what the key messages are in the book. And maybe just to start with is to focus on one of the key sections in the book, which is about oracy. And we were just wondering what it is that makes this so central to the educational outcomes that you think are desirable and you want to achieve.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Thank you very much for inviting me to have this chat with you. Yes, I mean, I feel particularly passionately about oracy skills. I dedicated a whole chapter in the book to this topic, simply because I think there is clearly a strong correlation between social disadvantage and oracy. It's very clear that if you were to incorporate oracy within the curriculum, it would raise standards, it would raise achievement for a number of children, particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds, SEND pupils, children for whom English is an additional language, all sorts of children who currently don't have a voice. They're not able to articulate themselves. They don't have confidence or self-expression. And the curriculum is not geared up to allow them to basically express themselves in any shape or form. So you could argue that oracy skills and self-expression is a key part of cultural capital. And this would distinguish between those students who can deploy oracy skills successfully as a learning technique and those that cannot. So from my point of view, unless you want to have children failing the system, and there are 1/3 of the children who leave school at 16 fail their GCSEs or fail to get the level 4 GCSEs that they should, then I think it's really important to compensate within our curriculum by implementing oracy skills in every subject. And, I can give you some examples of how that could be done through project-based learning. There is actually an excellent oracy framework which Voice 21 produced. ESB, the English Speaking Board, have a framework which leads to accreditation, which is levelled and can show progression for children from level 3 to level 8. And the level 8 enables the young person to gain UCAS points so that to go to university. Mm-hmm. So the accreditation is there. The oracy framework is there, which is competence and skills based. And now that spoken and listening language assessments no longer count towards GCSE English language outcomes, it has become even more important to think about the primacy of oracy within the curriculum, not least because without having that accreditation for spoken skills within English GCSE, it's very unfortunate, but spoken skills actually don't have any primacy currently within our curriculum. So, that's what I would suggest that we need to move towards.
And certainly, experience that I've had going into classrooms, the more we can get the students to talk about their learning, and I would sort of talk about talk learning, so that whichever subject they're in, if they're able to sort of take some ownership over their own learning and to be able to talk about what it is that they've learnt already, what is it they're learning at the moment. Mm-hmm. Do I need to be consolidating my learning because I don't quite grasp that concept, or do I need to be moving on to something that's perhaps a bit more complex as a learning activity? And if we encourage them to do that, they need to get involved in engagement with other pupils as well, other students, so that there's peer assessment going on. building on self-assessment, and then the teacher joining in on that conversation. I mean, is that a sort of model that you can envisage happening?
Indeed. I mean, it is a model that we used to have, in fact, in primary schools, and in early years it happens. Obviously, the teachers observing children. In Finland, the Finnish education system, that's what happens. The teacher will formatively assess children, when they have structured opportunities to develop their speech as part of a task or an activity, maybe as a presentation, or maybe in interacting with a peer. And the teacher will observe and assess using a competency-based approach. Now, it's not beyond wit. We can do that. We've got an ORACY framework which we can use. And effectively, what the advantage of that will be that if we, particularly in secondary, which I'm more familiar with, if we can move towards project-based learning, we can then develop cross-curricular approaches, which really, really mean that children are using their ORACY skills to develop learning. So they can showcase what they've learned, they can showcase what they can do. So if I give you an example, for example, if children are looking at looking at in geography, science and maths, they could be looking at climate change. Yeah. Now, they will be looking at deforestation, for example, in geography. They will look at sea erosion in science, and in maths, they'll clearly have ways of calculating, if you're looking at calculations around what's happening in terms of climate change and over a period of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so on. Therefore, they'll use all these skills, and because it's cross-curricular, and maybe they're researching it across curricula. So they're using their knowledge, they're manipulating the knowledge they're learning within these separate silo subjects, bringing it together in form of project, maybe thinking, right, we have to do a presentation on this. And the teacher could say, right, the presentation is to the UN and it's about climate change. So off you go. And the children then develop their spoken skills because they're having to articulate what it is they've been learning across those three subjects. It's a very simple way of doing it. And I, again, feel by doing that, you're starting to deepen children's learning. So it's not just about allowing them to speak. It is actually going a step further and saying, let's deepen the learning and let's assess the learning in a formative way. So we're giving them credit for, what they are doing with their speech. And the other point I was going to make is when we look at assessment in written work, we do, a lot of schools are still doing what went well, even better if, along those lines. There's absolutely no reason why we can't do that with spoken skills, because there's an argument, isn't there, Malcolm, that, it's very, it's difficult to assess spoken skills because it's something nebulous, or, how do we do it? Well, we can do it, because if you've got a competency-based checklist, then all you need to do is to encourage the child, show the strengths of what they've been speaking around, and then show the areas they need to improve upon. Finally, I will say, this has been happening in drama for years. There is a precedent there. So effectively, I would strongly suggest that by developing ORACY skills, as we've been saying, you're not just having a knock-on effect in English, you're having a knock-on effect across all the subjects where children can talk about the knowledge they're learning, but also, very importantly, Malcolm, from my point of view, as a French teacher, I think it will encourage children to develop confidence in learning another language, because the biggest issue I had as a French teacher was they were happy to write things down, happy to read French. Could I get them to speak French? No, because they lacked the confidence to self-express. They lacked the confidence to make mistakes when they were speaking another language. Yeah. And I think, bringing ORACY primacy within the curriculum will start unlocking all of that. So yes, that's...
No, absolutely. I agree with all of that. I think I was quite interested with the cross-curricular topic-based approach, because that then enables, for me, it enables another angle into it all, where the students get more ownership over what is it that I want to learn about this topic. So whether it's climate change or whatever, so they can start to design their own pathways. And it could be anything. And you've got a better chance of finding or the students themselves finding something that they're interested in.
Absolutely.
Rather than being told this is what we're going to learn about climate change. They're able to take ownership over that, start making learning decisions. And I think if they begin to do that, they will start to want to talk about what they're learning, because it's not a failure situation, because they're in control of their own learning. It's not that the teacher's saying, well, tell me about this, and you think, oh, if I'm going to get that wrong, I'm failing. All that pressure's taken away. So they become more engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a forced curriculum and they have to learn certain things, they will quickly become disengaged if they lose interest. And that's where they then struggle as they move through school. So I think, I don't know what you think, but I think that as a prime objective of trying to broaden out the curriculum, and there's a massive amount of knowledge and content available these days, and to be able to say we're only going to focus on this when the children will learn better by focusing on something that they're interested in, then I think we'll find that they will become more engaged, make better progress, and have better outcomes at the end of the day. So is that the sort of thing that you're sort of promoting in the book as well?
Absolutely. You've only got to look at, for example, business studies. So in business studies, children typically have to produce a marketing plan, for example. They're allowed to choose which product they want to market. And then basically they have to look at the consumer, and look at the pricing, the 4 Ps, price, place, product, and promotion. And then within that, they have to actually create a little, PowerPoint presentation, or how they're going to present it. And you would be surprised, or perhaps you wouldn't be surprised, but when you go into a lesson and children are doing this, and they pick the product that they're going to promote, you can talk to them and they get really passionate, so passionate about telling you what it is, why it's so good. They'll show you, well, this was what I did earlier, and now this is how I've done it, because I've got some feedback from my teacher, and this is how it's now changed. Now, surely we need to have that same enthusiasm and passion in every subject, but I don't see that when I go around some of the other subjects, for example. I won't see that same passion and enthusiasm, because they're not given, as you said, Malcolm, given that free rein to decide for themselves, what is it I'm going to research? And when you say, well, how did you find that? Well, I looked at this and then I thought, no, I'm going to do this. And they are able to articulate. And you start thinking, well, yeah, so if that approach works, for example, in business studies, or even in computing science, they have to do a similar sort of approach in terms of creating maybe a PowerPoint or, about something. So they will borrow from another subject, if you like, and bring that into computing science, because they're going to talk about how I made a robotic engineer, sort of some robotic, how I made a robot, for example, in design technology. So let me talk about that. So, the sky's the limit. And I think what we're doing is setting glass ceilings for children by not allowing them to, as you quite rightly said, go off and look, research, be independent, lead on their learning, and most importantly, talk about it. Because the talking then, as I said right at the beginning, the talking, unfortunately, is fettering a lot of our children. You will see those children who really haven't got the expression skills that they need, can't express themselves when you start speaking to them, about their work. And then you'll see others who are so confident and just soaring. Now, surely we need to create a level playing field in our schools. And the only way we can do that, we can't legislate for parental background and all the factors in their home, their home background and in their personal life. But what we can do is offer them structured opportunities within lessons. And I think we owe it to them. And to stop thinking around this silo working. Also, if I can just say, with the advent of EdTech, well, the advent of it's always been there, but during lockdown, children have had, a lot of exposure to remote learning, obviously. And one of the things that has been missed sorely has been social cognition, because they've not necessarily had the room to develop peer interaction, to develop speech as much as maybe they would in a classroom. And so I think it's even more important, as we're coming out of this, hopefully at some point coming out of this situation, that we develop we can develop ways of using technology which will promote the learning and the speaking. So one way around it would be to do flipped learning, where children actually are told to go away and research something, and then when they come to the lesson, they've prepared something to present. And that presentation, the teacher can then look at what knowledge they've learned, what don't they know, what do they know, and what the teacher then needs to plan for subsequent activities and tasks. But the mere, sort of mechanism by which they're delivering it is going to be around, their own, if you like, research. But also, they can be creating questions which they ask the teacher. Why does it always have to be the teacher asking questions of people? Yeah. And also this constant, you and I have both seen it in lessons where the answers are monosyllabic, yes, no answers, superficial knowledge. Why don't we do elaborative interrogative questioning, where you can actually deepen the questioning and start looking at the why, the how, the where, and so on, and get children to pose the questions rather than the teacher doing that. So I think it's about looking at inverting roles slightly here, and speech is one way around it, in my view.
And I think, to be honest, we try and look at it across the whole age range in school.
Yes.
The best early years practice does exactly what you're saying, and it's very much based on the child, and they've got to talk about what they're learning and so on. But what seems to happen, for whatever reason, and we haven't got time to go into identifying those reasons, but they get less chance as they get older. They seem to have less chance to be able to talk about their own learning, why they're doing things, and so on. And I think maybe just to give a message to everybody, maybe as a final thing, what would be the most important thing then you think people can take away from what we've been talking about? Is there anything in particular, just one little snippet that they might be able to take away?
I think if we see oracy skills as not something that's an add-on within the curriculum, because there may be teachers out there who think, well, with everything else I've got to do and get through my scheme of work, I don't really want to worry about oracy skills now. It's not an add-on. It's actually a catalyst to develop a whole host of skills that children need to deepen their learning and to acquire the knowledge and to actually move to the next level. And those skills are key life learning skills. I mean, we're looking at persuasive skills, we're looking at negotiation, we're looking at critical thinking, conceptual thinking, and analysis, and all of these skills can be triggered off through oracy skills. So to my mind, we shouldn't be thinking about it as an add-on. We should be thinking about it as a gift that we're giving to our children to enable them to learn more deeply. If you like.
That's great, Mina. Really appreciate the time we spent, and we could talk for hours on it, and I'm sure we will at some point later. But thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we just hope that people listening in will have taken something away from this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mina. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, right. So we'll cut off the end bit. I'll stop the recording anyway.
Recording.
That's down at the bottom there. Yes, stop.